With just 5 days left before the DHS continuing resolution runs out, lawmakers are weighing a mix of short-term fixes and longer-shot options to keep the department open. Those talks are unfolding alongside a crowded agenda that includes the SAVE Act, questions about crypto and banking, and the launch of a new Federal Workforce Caucus. We'll also look at what upcoming oversight hearings could mean for the funding debate with WTOP's Capitol Hill correspondent, Mitchell Miller. Mitchell, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely.
The top topic for us for the last several weeks has been appropriations. They've managed to get now 11 of the bills through, but DHS is the problem child, and they've only got 5 days to sort it out. What are you hearing?
It's still a pretty big problem child, and I think it's going to continue to be this week. They just can't seem to get to a middle ground on these reforms related to ICE and the Border Patrol. Democrats thought by making a 2-week continuing resolution for DHS that would put pressure and keep the momentum moving and that they could quickly do this. Republicans have always been skeptical that this could be done by this Friday. Senate Majority Leader John Thune was on the floor last week saying basically that they were not getting anywhere in connection with these talks, and he said, "I told you so." He just did not think that the 2-week window was going to be large enough, and it does look like it is not going to be large enough unless there's some miraculous development this week. Now, there has been a relatively new development where a lot of lawmakers are now quietly talking about the fact that they would like to maybe somehow tease out some of the overall DHS bill and pull out some of the things that are in it. So, of course, that includes FEMA, TSA, the Coast Guard. You know, Democrats and Republicans both know that this is not a winning issue to shut down any of these agencies. And so they are talking about maybe coming up with some kind of legislative proposal. It's still in its early stages where they would take that out and then they would leave the Homeland Security piece in connection with ICE and the Border Patrol as something that they will have to deal with moving forward. And we'll have to see how that will be done, because I think that could be kind of legislatively tricky, although the Senate can effectively make up its own rules as it goes along. So I think that's something to look for this week.
I was going to ask, have you ever seen that done where instead of a department appropriation, particular sub-agencies get their own?
I have not, not recently at any rate. I mean, it was already somewhat unique that when they took this package that they put it in an omnibus and then they pulled out Department of Homeland Security on its own. That in itself was rather unique. So now we're getting into the real micro cutting of this agency and trying to of this overall bill and trying to splice it down to these little agencies. That shows you, I think, how difficult they are finding these reforms as far as where they can agree on so many of them. They can certainly agree on a few of them, but there's nothing close to the 10 points that the Democrats came out with last week.
Even if they are successful in that approach, I mean, CBP and ICE have plenty of money for operations left over from the One Big Beautiful Bill, so they won't really be shut down, would they?
Right. And that's, I think, what a lot of the more moderate Democrats are trying to tell the more liberal wing of the party, which wants to really take ICE down to the studs and really redo it. And what these other lawmakers are saying, look, they already have a big pot of money. They got a ton of money in the Big Beautiful Bill. You're absolutely right. So, even if they try to make a statement, it really doesn't have any practical impact, if you will, related to those areas because they have so much funding right now.
So in the short run, come Friday, what do you think we're most likely to see? Another 2-week CR, a full year CR for DHS, or progress on this splitting things apart?
I would guess that we might have some progress on this splitting things apart. When I was talking to lawmakers this past week, they were really hesitant to weigh in on whether there, for example, would be another 2-week continuing resolution. I actually asked that question to Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, who you'll remember actually voted with Republicans in connection with the whole health care ordeal and getting the government opened again. And he said, you know what, I just want to wait and see what Republicans do. Well, we're already seeing that a lot lot of Republicans are just not going to go along with these reforms. So I think they're going to have to figure out another off-ramp. Really, a lot of people don't want another 2-week CR because they just think it'll just be the proverbial kicking the can down the road and it won't get anything done.
I'm speaking with Mitchell Miller. He's Capitol Hill correspondent for WTOP. Mitchell, this is really consuming like almost all of the legislative energy, but part of what was going on with the DHS conversation before was about the SAVE Act, voting registration requirements. How is that playing into these conversations now?
That has actually become a really big deal, and it just kind of reemerged, not completely out of nowhere, but certainly it was on the back burner for a while. But a lot of conservatives in the House said they wanted to make sure that they got a vote on this. It actually held up the vote to reopen the partial government shutdown situation last week. And ultimately, now House Speaker Mike Johnson has said he will bring that up for a vote on the floor this week. And the SAVE Act, of course, requiring in-person identification saying that you are a U.S. citizen, and they say it's just a matter of common sense that it needs to be done. Democrats, on the other hand, say that states say there have not been problems in connection with identification and that they have been overblown by Republicans. And then there's this issue that many people have heard about, maybe vaguely, that, if you're a woman who has been married and you have to go back and show your ID from, when you were not married, could that cause confusion for people? They just think it's going to, Democrats at least, think it's going to open up a can of worms. Republicans just say, look, you've got to show ID for so many other things. Why wouldn't you have to do this to vote? So I think what will happen legislatively is that this will pass in the House, and then we'll have to see what happens with the Senate. There's certainly a lot of Democrats digging in the Senate, saying that they will likely filibuster this, but Republicans feel like they have a pretty strong issue here. So I'll be interested to see how that evolves.
Well, there is certainly going to be a lot to watch on that front, but let's turn our attention to a little cheerier note. Last week, we had a new congressional caucus stand up, the Federal Workforce Caucus. Tell us about who's organizing that and who's on it and what their agenda is.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of different caucuses, and it's kind of surprising to me, actually, that there wasn't a Federal Workforce Caucus prior to this. But given all the things that we've talked about over the last few months in connection with DOGE and the cuts to the federal workforce, the region's lawmakers decided that they would get this together. So this is going to be led by Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, and the co-chair with him will be Virginia Congressman James Walkinshaw. And as you would expect, they are pledging to fight for federal workers, make sure that a variety of things that they are going to push back, whether publicly or legally. They'll be working with the federal employee unions. And of course, last week, we had the Trump administration finalizing that rule that could give them more power to fire about 50,000 federal workers who are focused on policy. This is called the Schedule Policy Career. It is being fiercely opposed by members of this new federal caucus, as well as the federal unions, as you know. So that's just one example. So I think that they are going to be a very active caucus, especially because of so many issues affecting federal workers right now.
You mentioned two members of Congress from the local DMV area. But as we know, about 6% now of federal workers are outside the Washington, D.C. metro area. Do they have good geographic distribution of their membership?
They do, although it is concentrated largely among the lawmakers here, at least for the start. But you're absolutely right. People forget the fact that federal workers are, of course, spread out all across the country. So they really don't want to make this too D.C.-centric. They want to tap into the expertise of the lawmakers across the country so that they can make sure that people know that there are facilities, in various states all across the country that are depending on active pushing back on some of these administration reforms. And of course, on the other side, the administration says these are long overdue and that they need more flexibility to deal with them.
Well, we'll see how they do. And speaking of seeing how things go, what do we have in terms of upcoming hearings and oversight activities this week?
Well, as you noted, a lot of energy has been taken in connection with Homeland Security, and that will not stop. This week, on Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to have two very big hearings. The first one will be on the House Homeland Security Committee hearing. That is going to include the heads of ICE, the Commissioner of the Customs and Border Protection, as well as the Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And this is somewhat rare because Republicans have been rather loath to provide oversight on some of these issues that are in some ways politically damaging to the president. Obviously, the White House has changed its stance in connection with what happened in Minneapolis over the last several weeks. Then there's going to be another similar hearing with the same leaders in the Senate Homeland Security Committee 2 days later. So this is going to be a big week in connection with this issue, and it'll be interesting if this has any impact on what we just talked about earlier, whether these reforms are just going to stall completely and we're going to get into even more partisan corners, or whether they will come together in some way.
I've been speaking with Mitchell Miller. He's Capitol Hill correspondent for WTOP. Mitchell, sounds like you have a busy week ahead.
We do indeed.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.